Don't kick yourself if you have never heard of Tampo. Certainly if you have no connection with the Philippines. There are even Westerners who have been living in the Philippines for several years and are still not familiar with the concept. All of that will change after you have seen this video. If you watch it till the end, you too will be an expert on Tampo and how to deal with it. In this episode of the Expat Files, we are going to follow a 5-step approach. First, we will find out what Tampo is. Where does it come from? And why does it even exist? Thanks to the collaboration of numerous expats, we will get a good understanding of how Tampo is perceived by non-Filipinos. How do people with a Western background react to Tampo? That will bring us seamlessly to why the whole concept of Tampo is incompatible with our Western values with regard to open communication and problem solving through dialogue. Finally, we will take the best of both cultures and try to mold it into a mutually acceptable blend, enabling future conflicts to be handled in a way that neither party loses face. My name is Paul, and you're watching the 7th episode of the Expat Files. First of all, we should establish that Tampo is a cultural thing, which only exists in the Philippines. It works perfectly when practiced between two Filipinos, but can cause serious problems when tried on a foreigner. Tampo is a behavior whereby one person withdraws his or her affection from the person who has hurt his or her feelings and gives that person the silent treatment. Tampo is a non-verbal conflict handling style that can only be explained by the non-confrontational social interaction among Filipinos. Tampo offers an acceptable means of expressing hurt feelings in a society in which direct expression of anger or resentment is discouraged. One of our participating expats commented that this subject is more complex than, say, how to catch a fish. It is good to actually have a word for this very complex behavior, he states. The most important disadvantage of Tampo is that the person who is in Tampo mode refuses to talk to you or even tell you what you did to make him or her act that way. But Tampo also has a major advantage, one we as Westerners could learn from, and that is the concept of not speaking in anger, something we all do far too often. The philosophy behind it is that when you are angry, you say things that you don't mean, things that you wouldn't have said if you weren't angry, and that you will regret later, as you can never take back those words. When Filipinos go Tampo, they avoid insulting you or saying things that they shouldn't. When I asked hundreds of expats how they perceive Tampo, the most recurrent words were manipulative, childish, immature, emotional blackmail, soaking, and spoiled behavior. It is not unusual for non-Filipinos to perceive Tampo that way, as it goes against everything we Westerners have learned about open communication and conflict solving. I really wonder if, at this point of this video, some expats may have moderated their views already, now that we have defined the socio-cultural origin of Tampo. The way the offending party, regardless whether the offence is genuine or perceived, responds to Tampo will be instrumental for making amends. And this reaction differs significantly depending if this person is a Filipino or a non-Filipino. The person who is using Tampo will expect the offending party to flatter and spoil her and shower her with affection. I'm using the female form now because most expats will be subjected to Tampo by their Filipino spouse or girlfriend. But don't get the wrong idea. Tampo may just as well be practiced by Filipinos of the male gender. Although an empathic and soothing response from the offender's part may lead to restoring the inner emotional relationship between these two people, it rarely tackles the core of the problem, which is the act or behavior that started it in the first place. The thing about Tampo is that the person refuses to talk to you and doesn't respond to your question, "What's wrong?" It is impossible to solve a problem if you don't know what that problem is. Filipinos will often apologize, even if they don't know what they are apologizing for. But that is something you shouldn't expect from a foreigner. A Westerner will apologize only when the problem has been clearly defined and when he acknowledges that he caused it. As Tampo doesn't clarify the cause, he will often react in inappropriate ways. These may include telling her to act her age, leaving her and waiting for her to beg him to come back, making her jealous, or going for a beer with the boys and coming home very late at night. I always try to remain impartial in my videos, but this time I must say that the responses I received from some expats utterly disgusted me. What kind of man would use the impoverished situation of the woman he claims to love against her by cutting off the money, or, and I quote, dropping her off at her original piece of shit shack that she used to live in, unquote. That same expat raves on about the Philippines being an insane country and urges his fellow expats to man up and lay down the ground rules. He concludes that he will absolutely not put up with childlike drama or bullshit from anyone. This kind of talk makes me wonder what he is doing in the Philippines and why he is in a relationship with a Filipino. Some others suggested that there's plenty of fish in the sea and want to just move on to another Filipino. And the most appalling reaction I had was from a male supremacist who said, "It is my way or the highway." I'm convinced that this macho behavior does not typify the average expat living in the Philippines. I believe in the goodness of people, and I must say that I know a lot of expats from different continents who treat their Filipino partners with respect and dignity that any woman, regardless of race or nationality, is entitled to. These are the expats who are willing to learn about the culture, integrate into the local society, and actively look for ways to make their relationship work in a way that satisfies both parties. The fourth step in reaching that goal is to understand why Tampo is incompatible with our Western upbringing. In most Western countries, we are taught that only verbal communication can solve conflicts. When something is bothering someone and we do not talk it over, the conflict can escalate and, in the worst case scenario, inflict permanent damage to the relationship. That is why it is of paramount importance to Westerners to sit down and get some answers to questions like, why are you angry? What did I do to make you angry? And why do you feel this way? By asking targeted questions, we can get a feel for why she is offended. That is, if she chooses to answer them. Did we really do something wrong, or were our intentions misunderstood? Did we deliberately insult them, or was it for lack of knowledge of their culture that we said something that is not at all considered insulting where we come from? If you are in a relationship with someone who comes from a different culture, you may expect to be misunderstood at times, because words and actions can be differently interpreted in other parts of the world. The fact that both parties are using a different conflict handling style, verbal for Westerners, non-verbal for the Filipino, adds an extra layer to the conflict. If both parties stick to their approach, they won't get anywhere. Compromising is the key. My approach would be to tackle the problem at the beginning of the relationship. But most Westerners, including myself, cannot do that when they are starting their first relationship with a Filipina, because they have never heard of Tampo. They have to wait until it happens to them and then react on it. Hopefully, not as inappropriately as some of the expats I have quoted in this video. That is one of the reasons why I made this video, so that newbies can start out with a backpack of information that I and most others didn't have. Don't wait to bring up the problem until your partner is in the middle of a Tampo attack. Choose a moment when you are both in a very good mood, happy and loving. Then casually mention it during dinner or while she is lying in your arm after mutually satisfactory moments of intimacy. practice beforehand what you are going to say and make sure that your choice of words does not offend her in any way. You can start out by acknowledging that Tampo is not necessarily a bad thing. However, it is not compatible with the communication style that you have been brought up with, which isn't bad either. Then try to distill the best out of each approach and work towards a perfect blend of both cultures in order to come to a win-win situation where each party gets to hold on to part of their approach and accepts part of the other one's approach. For example, you could tell her that you have a lot of respect for Filipinos' ability to hold their tongue in situations where Westerners will blow their fuse. Tell her you will do your best not to speak in anger either, and take some time out too. But also tell her that this shouldn't last too long, as communication is key to solving any problem. Ask her what she thinks is an acceptable time to keep quiet, and then negotiate around it if you think it is too long. Don't start this conversation from a superior angle. Don't put down any ground rules, as such would unbalance the relationship. Go into a fruitful dialogue based on partner equality and aim for a mutually acceptable agreement on how you will handle such situations in the future. Then stick to what you agreed upon. Do you find this issue rather difficult to discuss? Then just show her this video. And if she's a smart woman, she will understand that certain changes have to be made by both parties in order to live a peaceful and happy life together. Before I say goodbye, I want to quote a Filipina who said, "I'm a widow, and when my late husband and I decided it was time to get married, he asked me if I knew what expectations meant. He then went on to explain what he would expect from me and what I could expect from him. If either party was not willing to deliver, it would be better not to get married. Open communication is God's work," she said, with a religious devotion that is never far away when talking to a Filipina. And she continued, "If one doesn't start the relationship with upfront expectations and agreements, that relationship will have a rough road ahead." Impressed by these wise words, I wanted to keep them for last. I hope this episode of the Expat Files contributed to your understanding of Tampo and your ability to deal with it in a way that saves face for both you and your Filipina, and ultimately leads to a smoother communication with an outcome that makes both of you happy. Please like, comment and subscribe. See you in my next video.